Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Race Week, where we review Sunday at the 70th anniversary Grand Prix at Silverstone. The second race at Silverstone this season, and the big story of the race. Max Verstappen pulling off an audacious strategy to take victory at the 70th anniversary Grand Prix. Let's go in to the race report. The race got underway. Lewis actually looked like initially he got a better launch than Bottas, but Bottas held the lead going into the first corner. And Max Verstappen got ahead of Nico Hülkenberg going into Abbey as well. And it was a big battle between the two Mercedes going up the Wellington Straight as Lewis Hamilton was in the slipstream of Valtteri Bottas and attempted to go around the outside, reminiscent of last year's British Grand Prix. But he could not quite make it stick and Bottas stood his ground. But elsewhere, Sebastian Vettel had a spin, almost collecting the McLaren of Carlos Sainz and quite a few other cars for the matter. I don't know how no one clattered into him as a result of this. But Sebastian Vettel was put to the back of the field by his own error. There was some battling in the top 10, but everyone was kind of maintaining holding station, conserving tyres, not wanting to get within a second of each other because of the hot conditions. They wanted to cool the cars. So as you can see, the top three were in command, but Max Verstappen was going with the two Mercedes in the early stops. The two Mercedes pitted early, but Max Verstappen on those hard tyres, which proved to be a really good race tyre on the hards, he went really long into the race, whilst Alex Albon, who I believe was the first to pit, he was making some absolutely amazing moves. This was probably his best one, round the outside of Kimi Räikkönen without really much space. But he made that move stick, and he did the outside pass that cops on quite a few drivers. He proved. The thing about Alex Albon is it seems to be his qualifying where he struggles the most. His race pace seems to be very good. He seems to be very good at clawing his way through the field. Well, as you can see, Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris had a bit of a battle, but Charles Leclerc drove a really good race. It was speculation about whether Max Verstappen was doing a one-stop, because he was pounding round, looking really good on those hard tyres, but he did in the end pit for a set of the soft tyres. And his pace was so good, he managed to overcut Lewis Hamilton, almost. Had it not been for a slight delay in the pits, he would have been ahead of Bottas. But Bottas, he sorted out, overtaking literally on the way just after he exited the pits, a few corners after he exited the pits, and he was off. Then the second round of pit stops came, because then Verstappen pitted, because that made it obvious he wasn't doing a one stop, but Verstappen then pitted, and so did at the same time as Valtteri Bottas. And then Lewis Hamilton continued round. As you can see, his rear tyres looked absolutely horrible. And there was that, but people were actually wondering if he was going to go to the end. In the end, he didn't. He did pit. He rejoined behind Charles Leclerc, who was one-stopping. And then he quickly caught up to Valtteri Bottas, who he managed to pass around the outside of Brooklands to take second place. But it wasn't enough to catch Max Verstappen, who crossed the line to take his first victory of the season, Red Bull's first victory at Silverstone since Mark Webber in 2012, and the first non-Mercedes win of the season. And this really showed a weakness. I'll be discussing this in the weekly show next week a bit more, but Mercedes seem to have quite a weakness in hot conditions, as shown today. Now, looking at the race result, it is Verstappen, as I said, who won the race, ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Valtteri Bottas finished in third, ahead of Charles Leclerc. Another great drive in a difficult car to finish in fourth place, doing the one stop and proving to have good pace as well. Alex Albon finished in 5th ahead of Lance Stroll in 6th. Alex Albon was a really fighting drive to get up to 5th. Probably one of his best races of the season. Then you have Nico Hülkenberg, who was running in 5th for most of the race, but he actually had to do a late pit stop because apparently he was dealing with a lot of vibrations at the end of the race. Then you have Esteban Ocon finishing in 8th, then Lando Norris in 9th, and Danny Kvyat having a good race in 10th. Then Pierre Gasly will be disappointed not to have scored points ahead of Sebastian Vettel, Carlos Sainz, Daniel Ricciardo, who had a spin battling with Carlos Sainz. Then you had Raikkonen, Grosjean, Giovinazzi, Russell, that's supposed to be not Ricciardo. Then Latifi have to write these results in very short notice. So mistakes can happen. Latifi in 19th, and then Kevin Magnussen was the only retirement. Had a bit of a moment earlier in the race when he had a debatable rejoining of the track when battling with Nicholas Latifi, which landed him a 5-second penalty, but eventually he retired. I will be talking about the drivers' standings later on. But now I'm going to talk about the feeder series that happened, and there were some... Boy, things did kick off in the junior series today, didn't they? And we had more F2 controversy after yesterday's fallout, because obviously, as you all probably know, there was absolute drama after Dan Ticktum's team radio on social media relating to that. But there was more controversy in the Formula 2 race today. It was Robert Schwartzman who was on pole position. It was a great chance for him to get some points back on Callum Ilott in the standings. As you can see, he led the way. He had initial pressure from Mick Schumacher, but then Mick Schumacher made a mistake. And the gap really did yo-yo for pretty much the entire first bit of the race. But it looks like Schwartzman had this under control. And I actually thought Schwartzman was managing the gap quite a lot, sometimes purposely letting Schumacher in his DRS so that he can easily defend from Tsunoda, because it was looking like Tsunoda could be a bigger threat to Schwartzman at the end. Whilst you saw Guan Yu Zhou making some really good overtakes early on in the race, Guan Yu Zhou battling here with Christian Lundgaard, as you can see. I'm not quite sure what position that was for, but then things did not go well for Christian Lundgaard, as he actually then suffered a tyre failure going into the Magnussen Beckers. And I remember thinking at the time, this is going to be a real concern for the F1, but there were no issues in the F1 with regards to tyre failures. But this could have been costly for Lundgaard. But then Mick Schumacher picked up the pace at the end and caught up to Robert Schwartzman, and then it all kicked off. As you can see, Mick Schumacher, he got DRS going down the Wellington Straight, but going into Brooklands Corner, he turned in not realising that Schwartzman still had his front wing alongside, and Schwartzman's front wing was damaged. Mick Schumacher did put his hand up and accept responsibility for the incident. I was surprised that there was no action taken. But this was a controversial incident, especially considering it was teammates involved, and how much it could cost Robert Schwartzman in the end. Because he had a big opportunity to, even if Mick Schumacher had passed, he would have taken some good points out of Ilott's lead. I mean, I do still think that there's a good chance that he will come back at Ilott. Once he fixes his qualifying issues, he will be quite hard to beat. But he could have gotten a lot closer. Obviously, he would have moved back ahead of Lundgaard. He could have moved a lot closer, but then it all got taken out. Then he lost so many points due to an incident caused by his teammate of all people. Robert Schwartzman did try to continue, but he then in the end dropped out of the points. But it was Yuki Tsunoda, because Tsunoda was right behind when the incident happened, and he picked up the pieces and he took the victory. at the Silverstone sprint, the 70th anniversary sprint race, and ahead of Mick Schumacher, who was very angry at himself about the incident. Jack Aitken got a second straight podium, had a really good weekend in the Campos, ahead of Louis Delatraz, Guan Yu Zhou, Callum Ilott. He had a great weekend. Dan Tickton finished in 7th with Nikita Mazepin taking the final point. Then you had Daruvala, Giotto, Markelov, Drugovic, Schwartzman, Armstrong, Nissany, Piquet, Sato, Matsushita, Samaya, Alesi. Lundgaard finished in 21st in the end after his penalty. Well, not his penalty, his tyre failure, with Sean Gallale being not even starting the race. But looking at the Formula 2 drivers' standings, and Callum Ilott has a big lead. 29 points back to Christian Lundgaard in second. Then you have Robert Schwartzman 2 points behind in third, with Nikita Mazepin in fourth, Louis Delatraz in fifth, Yuki Tsunoda in sixth. He's having a great season. Mick Schumacher in seventh. Then you have Guan Yu Zhou in eighth, Dan Ticktum in ninth, with Felipe Drugovich rounding out the top 10. And then, of course, this morning we also had the Formula 3 race, which turned out to be an absolute thriller. Probably the most thrilling race of the season so far in Formula 3. With an incredible with action all the way through and an incredible last lap climax. The race got underway with Zendelli in the lead, getting into the lead. Barnicoat having a very bad start, dropping into 4th place. Pourchaire obviously battled out, as you can see. He eventually managed to get ahead, but the safety car was out immediately. The TV did not show what actually happened here. Obviously they didn't catch the incident, but Lucas Dunner and Caden Williams had a bit of an incident which brought out the safety car. And then Alex Peroni and Alex Smollier made contact on the first lap. Neither of them's fault, but obviously it ruined both their races. And then here you had Liam Lawson battling it out with Oscar Piastri and making contact. Thankfully both got away with that. But the same could not be said for Logan Sargent, who had a bad start to the race, and then he went into battle with Cameron Dass in the Carlin, and they made contact, which damaged his suspension, and the championship leader was out of the race. Pourchaire was being held up by the likes of... You have the likes of Pourchaire and Beckman battling it out, and Pourchaire managing to get past Beckman for 4th place, behind Ben Barnicoat, who was still holding the station in 3rd. But then Ben Barnicoat pulled ground to a halt, and he was out of the race. A real shame for him. He did a very solid job today, so it was a real shame to see him retire. But at this point, the main interest was in the train. Théo Pourchaire was leading a train of Lawson, Beckman, Hughes, Piastri, Vesti and Novalak. And it was all... You just had this feeling, and whilst at the front, Viscal was hounding Lorenz Zendelli for the lead. And there was so much action, you just had this feeling that as the stakes got higher on the final lap, there was going to be fireworks. And we were not wrong. I was not wrong. Because Bent Viscal managed to get past Lorenz Zendelli going into Copse Corner on the last lap, but Zendelli went back going into Stowe. However, he locked up on defence going into Vale, and then that allowed Viscal to get around the outside, and he managed to retake the lead on the last lap, and he won the race. Redemption for the second race in Hungary, and he took the win ahead of Lorenz Zendelli and Théo Pourchaire in his own battle at the end of the race. He just managed to fend off the chasing pack behind. There was a lot of action going into the final corner. Pourchaire almost lost it on the last lap, but he just managed to defend it. And looking at the result, it was Bent Viscal taking his first Formula 3 win ahead of Lorenzo Sendelli. Teo Porcher finished in third ahead of David Beckman in fourth. Liam Lawson in fifth. Oscar Piastri, he now actually has moved back within 1 point of Logan Sargent. Jake Hughes finished in seventh ahead of Frederick Vesti. Clement Novalak with Igor Fraga taking his and Charuse's first point of the season as a result of a post-race penalty for Enzo Fittipaldi. Then you had Das Futrell, Fernandez, Smolia, Stanek, Nannini, Fittipaldi, Verschoor, Flörsch, Hauger, Doohan, Caldwell, Malvestiti and Prix with Barnacote, Sargent, Deleda, Schumacher, Dunner and Williams as the race's retirements. Sargent leads the standings by 1 point, as I mentioned before. Then you have David Beckman in third, Liam Lawson fourth, Frederick Vesti in fifth, Teo Porcher sixth, Richard Verschoor seventh. Then you have Alex Peroni, Lorenzo Sendelli with Bent Viscal rounding out the top 10 of the standings. Now it's time to do a team-by-team review of the 70th anniversary Grand Prix in reverse constructors order. Oops, Mercedes aren't in last in the constructors, are they? Not as good a race for them this week as it was last week, because both Williams were kind of dropping back, but they were still battling with the Hasses and the Alfa Romeos, which is an encouraging sign for their future. Another poor race for them. You barely really saw anything of them other than the Magnussen incident with Latifi. And, of course, they are really struggling at the moment. Same can really be said for Alfa Romeo. Just like the Haas, they could only really be seen getting lapped by other cars. And their car is very poor in race pace. And also particularly qualifying pace, locking out the back row. Not as good as it could have been. I mean, they are in no man's land, as I said, kind of in no man's land. As a result of being quite a way ahead of the three teams behind them, but quite a way behind the teams ahead. But it could have. I think Gasly will be a bit disappointed to finish outside the points, but Danny Kvyat managed to take a single point for the team. Okay race for them, but with Esteban Ocon taking 4 points, but Daniel Ricciardo will be disappointed not to finish in the points after his spin. Another case of what could have been better for Racing Point. As a result, they had a good car, they had a lot of pace, but I think they would have expected more than they got. However, if it wasn't for their 15-point deduction, they would actually be in third in the standings at the moment. Very disappointing race for them. Only 2 points collected by Lando Norris. Carlos Sainz finishing outside the points. He had a disappointing day today. But they currently remain in fourth, but they have been overtaken in the standings by Ferrari. And that was all thanks to another great drive by Charles Leclerc, who is taking this car to places where it simply doesn't belong. And he finished in fourth place, while Sebastian Vettel showed, especially after a spin on the first lap, showed absolutely no signs of scoring points today. still a rocky road. He is not happy right now. And it looks like, as they said in commentary, it is going to be a messy breakup between Vettel and Ferrari. Of course, a very good day for them, taking their first victory of the season. And a first and a fifth is a good haul of points when it comes to the constructors, even though they, to be honest, the chance of them catching Mercedes is very small. But a good day for Red Bull, and there will be a lot of celebrations at Milton Keynes tonight. On the other hand, Mercedes will be leaving Silverstone scratching their head after really struggling with the hotter temperatures, and that doesn't really bode well for Spain next week with the hot temperatures in the Spanish summer that are to be expected there, which could really expose the car's weakness. So they will be looking at how they can fix their tyre cooling issues in hotter conditions. So, talking about the drivers' standings before we wrap up, it's Lewis Hamilton who, despite not winning, he has extended his lead to 30 points. Max Verstappen has actually overtaken Valtteri Bottas for second in the drivers' standing. He's 4 points ahead of Bottas. Charles Leclerc is now in fourth after a spate of good results for him. Then you have Lando Norris in fifth, 7 points behind Leclerc. Then you have Alex Albon 2 points behind Norris. Then you have Lance Stroll in seventh, Sergio Perez in eighth. Daniel Ricciardo. Sergio Perez would have been disappointed not to take part in this race. I think this is a race where he could have done something. He could have done it. We obviously know he is the master of tyre preservation. So I think he could have easily done a one-stop and possibly got a very good result for Racing Point. Daniel Ricciardo is currently in ninth, ahead of Esteban Ocon in 10th. Carlos Sainz is 11th, they're ahead of Gasly. Vettel is down in 13th. Ahead of Hulkenberg, who's now got points on the board, 6 points. Then you have Giovinazzi, Kvyat, Magnussen, with Raikkonen, Latifi, Russell and Grosjean yet to score points. So that has been it for the 70th anniversary weekend. That we will see you next. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in this weekend. We will see you on Thursday for the midweek recap, where we will go into more analysis about the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, and we'll preview the Spanish Grand Prix next week. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on Thursday next week. Goodbye.